I was at this crossroads, really, of I could continue to deny that voice and that calling to fit into this safe space where I'd been for a long time and making a certain salary and knew my way around, or I could take that leap of faith and answer the call, even at this age, in this stage of my life. And I did. April, I just closed my eyes and jumped full in to courage and fearlessness and decided it was time for me to write this book, get my story out in the world, and pursue my dreams.
Introducing The Vixen Voice, a podcast for ambitious women entrepreneurs ready to move into their feminine essence, live their truth, and unlock their full potential. I'm your host, April Roberts, and each week I'll be interviewing inspiring women who decided to take a leap of faith to pursue their dream. Women who believe that they were born for something bigger. Hey there, just popping in quickly. It's April Roberts, and I wanted to thank you for being a loyal listener of The Vixen Voice. It means so much to me. And because of that, we're going to be popping in these little announcements because I want you to be the first to know what's going on at the Vixen Gathering. So if you haven't done so yet, click the link below and check out the Vixen Founders Collective. The members who are already in are raving, and we would love to have you join us in the ultimate business consulting, networking, and personal growth community for Gen X female founders. See you there. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Vixen Voice. It is my pleasure today to be speaking with Karen Marginot. She is fascinating, and you are going to love this episode. Karen and I just met through LinkedIn, of all places, not too long ago, and we had such a fantastic conversation, and I was so obsessed with the idea of her new book that I wanted to get her on here as soon as possible. So speaking of which, I should probably tell you who she is and what she does. So Karen is a leadership coach and the author of The Bad Girls Club, Promises of a Spirituality-Based Recovery. So we're going to talk about how her journey to recovery, how she's sharing it with everyone, and how that led her to be a leadership coach and how it all ties in together. So stay tuned. You're going to want to hear everything. So Karen, welcome. So glad to have you join us today.
Oh, good morning, April, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to be here and talking with you again.
Yeah, I can't wait to dig in. You know, as you know, when we were chatting, I related to so much of what you're sharing. So as we go today, I think we'll both kind of share our journeys. And if you're listening and you ever wonder how alcohol or other substances play into your lives or the lives of a family member, then you will probably really relate to our episode, but we'll be talking about a whole lot more as well. So Karen, I always like to ask, you know, I love working with women who are around our age. Most of my clients, my clients range from like 35 to 62. And what I love is because we've lived some life by now, right? We have some experience. There are things we know we want to do, and there are things we know that we don't want to do. So I really, you know, for me, this is the ideal woman I love to talk to, I love to work with, etc. And what I've noticed is how multifaceted women are, and really amazing. And so what I'd love to ask you first is, what is a pivotal story of your life? I'm sure you've had many, but what sticks out to you intuitively or top of mind today that really helped create this amazing multifaceted woman that I'm speaking to today?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question, April. I mean, and like you said, after you've lived a certain number of years, you've gotten some seasoning in the pot, right?
Yep.
And many, many, many different types of experiences to pull from. I'm going to say, I think I'm going to talk about the most recent experience. Experience that I had. I was very fortunate in the early part of my journey, and we can talk a little bit more about the path that got me there. But I came about in business in my young 20s, right about the time that computers were coming up on everybody's desks, right? And so I just caught that tech wave at just the right time. And I knew I always wanted to be a writer. And so I pivoted naturally into this field called technical writing. I had no idea that existed, but it was just really coming up and about. So in terms of my most recent experiences, I ended up carving out a long career as a technical writer and then a leader in the technical writing space for several software companies. Most recently with Salesforce. And I had an experience there that ended up being absolutely beautiful. There were many changes, software changes all the time, and changes in personnels and changes in teams. And I landed with a manager with whom I had a little bit of friction. And what it caused me to do was turn that friction and take a look at that friction as an opportunity to look within myself. What is this about?
Love it.
What is this about? Right? It's not really about the other person, but what is it about in me, and what is it bringing up in me that I'm being called to look at? Maybe I'm being called to heal. And what it ended up being was this assumption that I would just ride that tech journey into retirement, right? I was just going to be comfortable and I knew what I was doing, maybe a little stagnant. I could kind of do my job in my sleep, but I really thought I was just going to ride it into the sunset of retirement. And lo and behold, what was happening was, no, I was being called to do something else. I no longer fit. I no longer fit. My purpose no longer fit. The things that I'm really good at doing was beneficial to the company, but not their top priorities at that time. So what do you do with that? What do you do with that? And I was left with this, I was at this crossroads really of I could continue to deny that voice and that calling to fit into this safe space where I'd been for a long time and making a certain salary and knew my way around, or I could take that leap of faith and answer the call, even at this age, in this stage of my life. And I did. April, I just closed my eyes and jumped full in to courage and fearlessness and decided it was time for me to write this book, get my story out in the world, and pursue my dreams.
I love it. I love it. So what's interesting is this has been a theme lately coming up, and I love that you took the leap of faith and jumped. So I often talk about, I had enough experiences, one being having been married to an addict living in another country. I've had enough 2x4 moments to the forehead that, like, when I understand I'm supposed to be doing something different or I need to take another path, I'm much quicker to be like, okay, help me figure this out. Let me do something. So I love that you had this aha, and like you said, you took a leap of faith. And why I love that too is I work with a lot of women who still have a corporate job or a full-time job, and they want to go full-time, outside of corporate and follow their passion. And I mean, if you're making good money, there's a certain place where you have to take a leap of faith because it's almost impossible to get your side hustle up to your salary, right? But at some point you have enough momentum or you have enough faith it's going to happen that you're like, okay, now's the time. And delaying that decision can be very harmful, right? You can miss that opportunity or delay the opportunity. So I'm curious, what told you to go for it now? Was it just so obvious, or what happened for you personally that you were like, you know what, I'm just walking away, I'm going to start my own thing?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We get hung up on certain things. I personally get hung up on old belief systems, right? In my case, my journey included being a single parent for a number of years. So I raised my two boys from the time they were 5 and 1. and I had to hustle, right? So I had to kind of reinvent myself. I had to hustle. I had to get it done. And so part of it was just divine timing. They've launched, they're off the payroll. They are successful. They are independent. They're wonderful, wonderful young men. And so I didn't have those kinds of provider pressures on my shoulders. So that was probably the biggest gift in terms of timing. Secondly, the salary, man, that was the last piece that was just killing me. And I remember just this past, early spring, knowing that I had to let go of that, and I could just feel it in my gut. I had so much fear around, well, what will happen? I've got, I make decent money and the benefits and all these things, and I've never left the corporate bubble and that safety and that infrastructure. And I was really sweating it out one night. And then in the middle of the night, this thought just bolted into my head, which was, wait a minute, I'm looking at this all wrong. What if I'm limiting myself with this particular number in my head?
Yes.
What if I'm actually worth double that, triple that, and I take whatever excess that I don't personally need and invest it in ways that are meaningful to me? I could invest it in, women's businesses. I could invest it in causes that I care about. What if I could return it and just keep that cycle of abundance going? What if I just joined that circle of abundance and that flow? Yeah. What if I just let go? And that was the last time I had any fear around it.
I love it. So I often run 3-day challenges on money mindset for women. And, I do the exercises every single time, because the reason it became important to me is I always had an abundant mindset. Like my whole life, I was just like, I didn't see limits. And my parents also raised me that way. So I have to give credit to my parents. Like they were careful to make sure they didn't limit me. And they even protected me from other people limiting me, which was a beautiful gift. But I realized, like, when I sold my company, I got out of a relationship, and I actually, as I was getting certified as a coach, I went through a money mindset exercise, and I was like, oh, I have let scarcity creep in. Like, I didn't know where, but it came from like relationships, just situational. And I was like, I have to protect myself from this. Like, I had this gift of limitless abundance, and I have now like reduced it. And so every time I go through that exercise with them. And so I love how you talk about, what if I'm limiting? What if I get 2x or 3x? And you're thinking about investing in something you love. Because what drives me is I'm a giver. And, a lot of times people are like, oh, don't overgive. And I'm like, well, if I have a lot of money, who cares? I mean, when I sold my company, I bought all the women in my family a Louis Vuitton purse for fun. And even like my niece, who hadn't spoken to me in like a year, and guess what? She sure didn't speak. I mean, I didn't buy it for that. I had to, I had to think hard, like, am I doing this or not with her? Because you do have to be careful with gifting, right? And I just thought,
of course,
I don't want to leave her out. I want unconditional love. And, it impacted her that she wasn't left out, right? And so,
Amazing.
if I were doing this all the time, that's a whole different thing. But it's so nice to have this ability. And it's not that it has to be something so material. I took my mom to New York City one time to an Andrea Bocelli concert. And she was like, that's my favorite trip of my life. So I'm driven by like creating experiences with people I love, not just for me. And you're driven by being able to invest in things you believe in. So I think that's so important to tie that purpose.
Absolutely. And I think you're also really honing in on intention, right? It really is when I found, and that's what this journey has brought me. And it didn't just start with me, leaving corporate and trying to start my own thing here. I've been on this path for a while, but really thinking about, this is my life. It's the Mary Oliver thing. Like, what are you going to do with this one, fabulous, amazing life that you have? What are you going to do with this time? This is my life. And it's precious to me. And so how do I want to spend it? How do I want to express myself? What do I have inside of me that I am uniquely positioned to give to others? What's the intention behind it? What is my impact? And so when I start tapping into that kind of energy and I ask myself some of those questions, magical things can happen.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. I interviewed an Irish storyteller, Maria, recently. That episode is phenomenal, by the way, if anyone listening hasn't heard it. But she talks about the wise questions, and it's an Irish tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And she implemented these in HR in a company and took their turnover from like 70 something percent to zero using these
Wow.
questions. And it's very much like what you're talking about, like, what am I built to do? What am I here to do, etc. And I think, in today's world, we don't take time to slow down, reflect, and ask ourselves these questions. I think just asking yourself, what do I want, sometimes, because I think what we want often points us to our purpose, right?
It can. It actually can. And then for some of us, and I'm going to put myself in that bucket too, I didn't
Yeah,
even know what I wanted. I didn't even know how to
I
tap
know.
into that. So
Mm-hmm.
I came up at a time, there was this song, I want to say it came out in 1972. Carly Simon wrote the song and sang it. It was very popular. It was called The Girl You Think You See. And it was all about this girl who could be whatever it was that you wanted her to be. She could morph
Wow.
herself into different kinds of characters or different kinds of, and it was
Yep.
all about her purpose was, I want to deliver to you what you want. Well, that was sort of that was my siren song, right? That was my swan
Mm-hmm.
song for many, many, many years as I was growing up. So it took part of my journey kind of circled back around to, well, what do I want? And is it
Mm-hmm.
okay to want? And is it okay to desire? And is it okay to have passion around these things? For a lot of years, I'd shut all that down and I did not even know what I
Yeah.
wanted. I wanted to know what you wanted. I was all about that. So I've come to understand, at least today, in this iteration of where I am, which is subject to change, and check in with me in 6 months. All this might be different because I'm continuously learning and growing. But for
Exactly.
today, that is how the universe, spirit, God, whatever name you want to put to some sort of divine energy, if you think there is divine energy, and it's okay if you don't, but that's how it comes in, and I ground it and I bring it to the earth, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
channel. It's want, it's desire. What am I drawn to? What am I curious about? What am I curious about exploring in myself?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And that's actually, that concept is what led me to do the work I do now, because I noticed a lot of women had given up wanting. They didn't think it was okay to
Yes,
want, right? And Dan Sullivan has a
absolutely.
book, Wanting What I Want, and it's an entrepreneurial book. And after I read that book, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what my clients need, right? Like, they need to be given permission to dream again, to want, to
Yes,
like be true to themselves. And so, yeah, that's a lot of the work I do. And that's why I love having the community of the Vixen Founders Collective, because we all come together and share these things. So, you know how powerful it is when you vocalize it. It's not just that you understand,
absolutely.
but you vocalize, and then people are like, well, how's that going for you? Like, what have you done for this? And then they cheer you on when you get it. Like, it's super powerful.
I tell a story about
Yeah.
this ring. I'll show you this ring here, April. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's
Beautiful. I can.
aquamarine and remember emerald. Aquamarine and emerald. I bought it this year in Greece. And when I was in Greece for a month with some friends at a writers conference, and then hanging out with some friends, and I was meeting a friend for coffee and walked by the store, and it's like the store just pulled me in, and it was a teeny tiny little wooden store, but all I saw was this ring, and I said, oh my gosh, and I tried it on, I put it on, I loved it, and I asked the store owner, how much it was, and she told me, and I thought, oh gosh, I didn't budget for this. I've already bought myself trees. My goodness, I'm already in Greece. I can't have it. It's too much. It's too much. So I put it back. And I walked out of the store And April, this longing just hit me, just washed over me. And I stopped and I thought, am I going to regret this for the rest of my life if I walk out of here without this ring? And I'm not a big jewelry person anyway. And yes, so I turned around, I went in and I bought it. And I sat down with my friend Kate for coffee. And I'm telling her the story. She said, well, that's ridiculous. What came up for you? And I said, I didn't want to feel greedy. I didn't want to be greedy. And she said, oh, well, what's bad about being greedy? And I said, oh, that's just the worst thing possible, right? She said, I want you to go back to your room, pull out a piece of paper, write a letter to greed. Wait a day. Here's the kicker for me. Let greed write you back and see what happens. And what came up for me was a memory of a book that my parents used to read to me when I was a little girl. It was called Mr. Grabbit the Rabbit. And it was about Mr. Grabbit the Rabbit would take everything out of everybody's grocery carts and hoarded all the things. And then he got into trouble and the townspeople saved him and he gave everything back. So no one ever called him Mr. Grabbit again. And I realized that was the source. That was the source story and the belief system that I had around wanting, being associated with greed, which means people won't like you. And that's when I shut it down. I shut it all down at like age 5. So now, all those stories we tell ourselves were there to help, as you know this, because you're a coach, they're there originally to try to keep us safe. But we don't necessarily, operate in the world in the same way today. And so we can, when those stories come up, we can thank them, bless them, give them something to do, tell them no action's needed right now, and continue to move on in our own power.
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm so aligned with, first of all, I knew the ring was from Greece when you showed it to me because I have a necklace and bracelet from Crete and it reminded me of the stones that my ex-husband bought me. And similar, we were in a store and I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. And we were dating then. And then he surprised me and bought it for me. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it's so weird. I knew instantly it was from Greece before you told us. And then I have a similar story. I was like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, and I was with my mom's best friend. And, we were at the mall and my mom had went in one store and I went in some store with her friend. And it was like a $1 seashell. And for some reason, I just wanted that seashell. And I asked her friend if she would buy it for me. And I got in so much trouble for asking her to buy me this sheesh. Because my parents always taught, like, respect others, respect their property. Like this was big in our household. And so I was told the same thing. I can't ask other people for things. And it took me a long time to unwind that. And so, thank you for sharing that story. And the point is, that's why it's important to do this work. Like you wrote your letter and you realized, and that's, when I do the Own Your Worth, stories like this come up for women and they're like, oh my gosh, that's why I do that this way, right? Like, and then you can release it.
You can, and you can release it, but I'm also a really big fan of bringing it home, right? These are abandoned parts of ourselves, and there's a lot of people, and I used to do this too, when stuff like that comes up, it makes us uncomfortable. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to feel that way. And so it's often very common we try to shut that down or fix it or make it go away because it's uncomfortable. And I have found more integration when I welcome those parts of me in. Come on back home, right? Come on back home. There's space for you here. I'm going to take you with me because at the end of the day, that's just that little girl. It's just that little girl. And we carry all of ourselves with us every day of our lives. Emery Hall has a beautiful poem that I just sent to a bunch of my friends yesterday called 1,000 Different Women. And if you aren't familiar with it, I'd really recommend that you look it up. It's gorgeous. She even has a recording of it to music. And it really is about, I am the culmination of 1,000 different women who I've been up to this moment. And I'm going to bless them. I'm going to thank them. Even the ones that, as you will see in my book, weren't the most appealing at the moment. I reveal some pretty honest in this book. I'm a little nervous about it, but there's parts of me in my early 20s that aren't great. right? But we all have those moments, and
Yeah.
it's okay to own them, and it's okay to share them, because we're humans, we're not robots.
No, it's part of our human journey. I always joke, like, let go of perfectionism. Like, basically, we're perfect when we're dead, right? If we did it right. And I'm not ready to be dead yet, so I'm okay not
Nope.
being perfect. we're, we're gonna,
Nope.
I still have more work to do, so we're good to go. So let's chat about your book. You said you shared your story that you were at Salesforce, had this amazing job, you had some friction with someone on your team or a supervisor, and it led you to really go within, which I love that. And I want to re-emphasize, because as I was working on what triggered me, and luckily I've gotten to where I don't get triggered by much. So if I get triggered, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? Let's go, right? But I worked on them by always, when I got triggered, not blaming the other person, saying, okay, what is this stirring in me that I need to take a look at? And that sounds like exactly what you did. And look at this beautiful gift that I brought you. You're like, well, kind of. Tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna honor it. When the friction started, I did other the other person, right?
Oh,
It was
sure.
all I was mad as all get out. Like, what is happening here, and why is this person being like this to me? And I had to kind of run that. That's a story I tell myself. That's a defense mechanism coming up. Like, oh, I'm not ready to look at myself yet. But I will have to tell you that after the time I've been spending on this journey, where I've been able to take a look at myself, that time gets shorter and shorter. And I knew immediately, this really didn't have anything to do with the other person. She's a lovely, lovely woman. And she was a gift. She was a gift because she's the one who was the catalyst in my life to bring me this new truth, which was, hey, you're being called to do something else. Right. Yeah. And even though I didn't necessarily really want that message at that time. But so it's a process. It's definitely a process for me.
Oh, no. I always say healing is like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 more forward, 1 step back. It's not linear. So that went down, and then it liberated you to leave corporate America, let's just say, right? Yes. And to pursue your dreams, and you decided to write this book. So walk us through. Obviously, it wasn't like you left and there was magically a book. So what were your first next steps, or how did you know that was going on? Like, what kind of happened first, or what was your first understanding?
Yeah. Well, the book journey actually started a couple of years before. So I had, when I hit a certain birthday with a 0 on it, I decided it was time for me to get out in the world, and I started traveling. So I started that year by going on a hiking trip through the glaciers and the ice caves in Iceland in January. Blew my knee out. I have bad knees, and blew the knee out. The knee was done. And so I'd had some surgery a couple months later, and I'm sitting on my couch recovering from surgery. And a friend of mine who's also a coach, I'm on the phone with Julie, she says, when are you going to write that book you've been talking about? Now, I have been wanting to be an author since I was like 4 years old. And I've written volumes and volumes of things that I'd never shown anybody. I settled for a career in tech writing, which was the closest I would let myself get, but that's not my writing, right? I kept all my writing very private. So I thought, I don't know. Not feeling it. And she said, you need to go on a writer's retreat. And I said, ooh, that's a great idea. So I get on the Google, find one that resonates with me. It sounded amazing. And I looked at the details, and it's in Kenya that summer. And I said, well, guess I'm going to Kenya. So I packed my bags and off to Kenya I went. And I was there with, I think there was one other American there, a few people from Europe, several from Africa. And I stood up with a very shaky voice, shaking hands, shaking voice. And I said, I've come all this way, halfway around the world. I will read my work out loud to you. And I had started writing this story. And much to my shock and surprise, people loved it. They encouraged me, and the writing coach there, Sarah Bullen, who is remarkable out of South Africa, said, I want to work with you, and I want to, see you continue this on. So the work had actually started a couple of years before, but my immersion in my corporate job, I just didn't have a lot of energy left over for the writing at the end of the day. So what I did was last fall, I took some time off of Salesforce and took about 3 months off last fall and really just cranked the book out and found that it was a couple things that I found. One was that this was the story that was in the way of anything else coming out of me. It was demanding to be told. I had to just get it out. So I was writing it just to kind of get it out of my system, and I thought I would put it in a drawer and be done with it, right? And when I was done, I handed it back to Sarah, and she read it, and she said, okay, this is going to be a book on shelves. Start making a list of publishers who will accept unagented manuscripts. And I said, this is going to be on shelves? Are you kidding me? I was shocked because I had no expectations. My only ask of myself was to finish it and get it out of my system for something more worthy, right? That's what I thought. This is just in the way. So every step of this process has been a complete surprise to me. It's been a gift. It's been something that exceeded my wildest expectations. And so I did the thing. I did the footwork, as they say. I made the list of the publishers. I started putting together query letters. I sent it out. And within a couple of months, I had multiple offers for this book, which was stunning to me. And I ended up working with Kohler Books out of Virginia Beach. They are lovely. And John Kohler and Miranda Dillon and Catherine Harold are just the most remarkable team of publishers and editors and designers that you could ever ask for. And they've been just incredible to work with, super supportive. And I'm really finding that this book, this story, the stories of our lives, we need to share them. We need to share them, and all of our voices are needed, right? Because that's how we start making an impact. If we keep it all held up within ourselves, no one gets to benefit from our light. So the point is to take that big step forward, put it out there. It's really not about me. It's about the story, to be of service to others. And that's the spirit with which I'm releasing it. You know, I'm kind of now I'm just kind of along for the ride. It's taken on a life of its own, as books do. So now it comes out in January.
Yeah, so it's coming out in January. Tell us about the details.
So it'll come out January 28th is the actual launch date. I'm in the process of putting together launch celebrations now. And so I'm going to do one in person in Alexandria, Virginia. And then I'm also putting one together for virtual because I have lots of friends who have helped me along the way across the world. I'll do one also when I return to Greece in the summertime in June for my friends out on that Grecian island. So the story really does talk, it really is my recovery story, and it doesn't cover, I've been recovering since 1985, so it's not a 40-year slice, it's really a 10-year slice of my life. And you meet me kind of at the beginning of the end, at age 21, 22, when I was bottoming out. And I remember those moments as if they happened yesterday, because lots of the feelings stayed the same, right? We are trying to do our best. We don't know that we are not fully equipped. We're just trying and trying and trying and trying and trying. And when you're trying so hard and you're using things to cope that may not be the healthiest choices, you're kind of starting that descent into falling apart. And when you're trying to do your best and live life well and be a success and getting approval from other people when you're falling apart from the inside out, that's a hard place to be. And I remember those feelings. My particular journey into this happened to involve alcohol and drugs, but that isn't the only way you can find those moments of being called to enter a path, right? For some people, it could be power, money, sex, food, you name it, phone addiction now is a big thing, or gaming. There's a whole lot of ways people use things outside of themselves to try to cope with and heal what's going on in here. I think that's just a common human experience. And then it's just a matter of degrees, right? like, how hard are you going into this thing? So my path involved substances. Maybe somebody else's path involves something else. But what I'm inviting people to do if they want to read the book is listen to the feelings. Listen for the feelings. That's what my counselor told me. When I became, someone who entered recovery, I was very young. And most of the people that I was going to then, be part of their journeys and get help from, and peers, that sort of thing, they were significantly older than me. And I had a hard time in the beginning identifying in and relating in. I was this little punk rock girl, right? But he encouraged me to listen to the feelings, and that's where I found connections. That's where I found that human connection. And that's when I found out I didn't have to figure everything out on my own. I could ask for help. I could listen and learn from other people, and I could listen and learn from other people's journeys. And that's when things started changing for me. I had to learn to get okay with being vulnerable and telling people a little bit of truth about myself. And I had to learn how to sit on my hands and listen for a bit. Lots of learning in the beginning.
So the book starts at that point, and then where does it go through to? Tell us I know you don't want to tell us the whole story, but give us an overview.
Yeah, I'll give you a good arc of it. So, I had this idea at that time that I was kind of a mess just because I did drugs and drank too much, right? And if I just stopped those things, everything was going to be fine. I just had this big expectation about myself. And of course, I am a recovering perfectionist, and I know how to get stuff done. And sure, you just power through and just, flip a switch and live your life. That's not exactly what happened, April. I'm here to tell you that I kind of crashed and burned a little bit when I was clean and sober a year later, because you know what? I didn't want to change. I didn't want to look at myself. And so I had to have sort of a second reckoning without drugs and alcohol for me to really get that, like Taylor Swift said, I'm the problem. Guess what? I'm the problem. And there was much I had to look at and be willing to grow through. So then the story kind of takes off. You meet me as I'm bottoming out. You walk with me through my rehab experience, where there's a lot of taking a look at my life and memories and things that I thought about myself. And then I get launched back out in the world. And all those experiences that I had to embrace as an imperfect young woman, a little bit of ego reduction, a lot of forgiveness. There's a lot there about understanding who I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up, not just in my work life, but in relationships, with partner relationships and friendships, and then with my family. And what does forgiveness look like? What does love really look like? And I found that for me, at least, I'm not the first person to ever say this, but it really does all start from within. So I had to learn first to give myself the kind of love, forgiveness, and acceptance that I was seeking from other people. When I found that from within, then I could extend that to others. And that's when I really tapped into that whole, what we call now, there's abundant flow cycles and things like that. But it really does start here. There was much I had to work with. You end with me kind of fast forwarding to what my life is like today. I certainly don't cover 40, don't try to talk about 40 years, but the gifts of this for me has been, an elimination of anxiety. I have moments, I think right now I'm suffering from a little bit of election anxiety. This is a hard time in this country right now.
I think everyone in our country is suffering from that right now. Even
so
I don't
alone.
get involved. No, I usually do not get involved in politics. Obviously I vote.
I don't either,
but yeah, I realize that.
It's a hard time.
Yeah, and even my parents who do watch these things all the time, my mom's like, I don't want to watch anything else. Like, she's like fatigued. And I'm like, this is kind of your life. This is what you watch all the time. So yeah, it's a tough time, and it's time to support each other.
It really, really is. And, I've had freedom, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
freedom from anxiety, generalized anxiety. I've had freedom from depression.
Yeah.
I've had freedom from fear. I remember my son one time asked me, my youngest son, he came home from school and we were talking. He looked at me and he said, "Are you afraid of anything?" And I really had to think about it. And I said, I kind of don't think I am.
Yeah.
That base fear that I
Same.
had about measuring up and doing the right things and being good enough, all of that's been resolved for me. I just have a lot of joy now and contentment.
Mm-hmm.
I think where I've settled in for me is I really value contentment
Yeah.
over, happiness. Happiness and contentment kind of are hand in hand for me because when I'm content, I'm feeling pretty happy. But I've landed on a base of gratitude, contentment,
Mm-hmm.
peace, joy, and a lot of freedom. A lot of
Yeah.
freedom to move around this world and be who I am and speak with my voice and just offer it. And I know I'm not going to be for everybody, and that's okay too, right?
Yeah.
But
Oh,
the
well,
more I put myself out there, the more my people will find me.
Yeah, and you've hit very strong frequencies, and I'm a healer as well, and the first thing we were taught is forgiving ourselves, loving ourselves, accepting ourselves, and then you start doing it outward as well, right? But you have to build the base
Absolutely.
within yourself, and it heals and fixes, and then it's almost like it builds this force field around you where you're protected, and I think that's where you've hit into the abundant frequency because you're protected, and then you can go out there and just no, I can totally understand a lot of what you're sharing and how it came in. So, you started writing the book while you were still working. You took 3 months
Mm-hmm.
off to finish it. It sounds like an amazing story. And then, how did that lead to your new business, your new career?
Oh,
Like,
yes, yes. Well, part of what happened too, while I was at so many gifts from Salesforce, I was put through a leadership development program right just as the pandemic was starting. And part of that program, I was given a Better Up coach. So I had a session with this coach from Better Up. I'd never really worked with a coach before. People had been telling me for years that I should consider being a coach. And I thought, who does that? Who walks around and calls himself a coach? That just sounds so pretentious to me, but I'm not going to do that. And I sit down with this one session with this coach and he looks at me and he says, you're a coach. You really ought to look at this and go get certified. Here's where I got trained. Here's where I got certified. And I said, really? And so the more I talked to him, the more I understood how many misconceptions I had about it and what the work really was involving. And it really did appeal to me. And again, it was one of those calls, right? The universe tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, we have this opportunity here. You want to take a look at that? So I did, and that became my passion project during the pandemic years. And I became an internal coach at Salesforce along with my day job. And so that's where I began
nice.
to practice coaching. And I was working with vice presidents and senior vice presidents and people in various stages of leadership. And I loved it. I loved
Mm-hmm.
it. That's where I really found just complete alignment, right? Like I am here in this moment, very present, doing the thing that is intuitively so natural for me, and it is of value and service to others, and that is just my
Yeah.
jam. So I did, continue that work and pursued further certification, and so that was a natural segue for me to lean into as I was considering leaving the corporate world. What am I now going to offer in my business, and what is that business model going to look like? So for me, it really is individual coaching, team coaching, and the book really ties into that for me because I found one of the themes in my book is you've got to learn how to lead yourself. If you can't
Mm-hmm.
lead yourself, how are you possibly going to be able to listen and guide others, right? I learned through my recovery journey how important it was for me to develop a vision for myself and a vision for my life and to create ownership for my life, and then to have, tap into courage and fearlessness and bravery and that inner leader kind of stuff to just go ahead and put the action in and do the work to create that life. And so that now is what I can journey with and partner with others. It's not so much me as a coach, as you know, it's not so much me advising, it's for me to create that space for people to do that discovery themselves. And I think also my recovery journey, because, I've been to some places and I've seen some things, it kind of ripped out a lot of judgment that I had about myself and others. And so that creates this natural safety people feel, that people told me, even in corporate, that they were able to open up and tell me things they'd never even told, their partners, because there's a safety that in the space that I'm able to hold with them. And there's a joy. I like to say I am a trauma informed and recovery informed, but I'm also a joy informed coach, because really it is about walking with a little bit of a lighter heart, taking ourselves a little less seriously, understanding that no one gets out of here alive. This is it. And so let's have some fun and let's live this life we want to live.
Yeah, I love that. And you touched on an important thing when you said you create space, because I think a lot of people are very, I did an episode on therapy versus spiritual healing versus coaching, because everything has its play, right? It's different outcomes. And I think there's a lot of confusion now because coaching has gotten so big. But a coach, like you said, does create this space and you come to your answer. A consultant you bring in to help you solve problems, right? And a lot of times I don't think that people understand this difference, to the degree that I was getting paid for coaching and they expected me to consult. And I was like, no, consulting's twice the price because I have work to do in between, right? Like, it's a little bit different. And I'm not saying it should be that way, but I do it that way because I don't want to do as much consulting work. I like doing the coaching work better. So I'm like, I'm happy to consult you, but here's the package, right? Let's do this.
Exactly.
But I love how you explained it's like the holding space. And, that's something I love, because I think all the women I work with, they know the answer. They just need the space and to take the time and the reflection and to be asked the right questions to find that answer within themselves.
Absolutely. And kind of circling back to what you were talking about at the beginning of this conversation is women generally are doing so much. We are so primed for the doing. And then think about what's happened in women's lives since the pandemic, during the pandemic, and since the pandemic. That intense labor that women fell into doing during the pandemic has not really let up. And it was kind of out of kilter even before the pandemic.
Yes.
So where do women find that space? We're on that, my dad calls it the treadmill years, right? Where you're just on the treadmill and you're cranking it out, you're getting it done, and you're showing up and you're getting it done for your family, and you're making sure the kids are doing this and your husband's got that, and this is happening and that is happening. When do you feel okay to take a big step back and allow yourself the space and the introspection and the safety to do this work?
Well,
women
and what's
continuously deprioritize that. I'm so sorry. Women deprioritize that for themselves.
I 100% agree. That's why I only work with women, because I think it's so important. And I think they are on the burnout treadmill because of what you're explaining. Because also when you look at masculine and feminine energy and just spiritually how women should be aligned, like standing in their dignity is very important for women. But, we all have masculine and feminine energy and it should be balanced. But when you're on the treadmill, you're leaning heavily masculine. And so if you're not tapping into that feminine energy, that burnout comes fast. Depression comes fast, a lot of different things. And the interesting thing is the feminine energy is resting and receiving. So if you're never resting and receiving, and it's joy and it's connection and it's relationships and creativity, you writing your book, right? And so if you're not tapping into that, I just have this theory that this is why we're seeing a lot of burnout in women, because what drives me is I was a financial planner before this, and Fidelity did a study that I went to a conference in 2022 as I was leaving that practice and doing this. 12 years previously, women made up 30% of the financial industry. And in 2022, they made up 30% of the financial industry. Well, it's no way that new women are not joining those 12 years. So that tells me that women, when they get on this treadmill and they have the responsibility and different things going on, you know, for those of us in the sandwich generation, their kids, their parents, there's everyone we're taking care of, that women are choosing to exit the industry because they can't sustain under the expectations. And that makes me personally sad because I owned my own business. So I was an independent financial advisor. And if more women would tap into that, guess what? If you have kids in school, go work from 8:30 to 3:30, right? Like that's when you have appointments and you see clients, and you can make a very sustainable living by leveraging your time and building a team. So that was a big part of why I do the work I do now, because I'm like, there are all these amazing jobs that women could do if they had the courage to do their own business, right? And set their own time and design it around their life.
You know, and I want to thank you for talking that through, because you just brought up a super important point. So there's this picture behind me. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little crafty thing. It looks like maybe a 6-year-old did this, right?
Yeah.
This is my artwork. This is my artwork. So when I got burned out in the fall, before I took some time off from Salesforce, before I jumped into the writing the book, I couldn't even get near a computer. I couldn't get near a keyboard. So I started taking art classes. And this is reminding me of the conversation that you just posted from yesterday on your podcast with Susie Neville and Amanda Kaufman about play. So I started taking art classes. I've never taken an art class as an adult. Maybe I took one as a kid.
Yeah.
And I'm in this art class. I'm at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Arlington, Virginia. And they had a one-day workshop called Wellness and Multimedia Art. And I said, that's for me. I'm all about that. And we got everything out. We got charcoals out and pastels out and watercolors and clay. And I sat and giggled. I had so much fun. And I said, I'm going to make bad art every day. And that really helped me get out of that perfectionism, performative. I'm going to make this good. No, I'm going to make bad art. It's going to be worthy. I'm just going to go and get my fingers messy, right?
Yeah.
And that's what brought me back that feeling of joy and play and lightening up. And that's when I realized I can't do that by myself. You tapped into this. You can create your own infrastructure. And so that picture behind me is my representation of my infrastructure. Because leaving corporate, I had this built-in infrastructure, right? I had benefits people, and I had, people figuring this out and people figuring that out. I had to recreate that in my life. And I had to figure out what's important to me. Well, for me, I needed some insurance, and for me, I needed this, and I need business partners, and I need, someone who's really good at websites, and I need someone who's really good at social media, and I need this team. So I built my team, which took a lot of pressure off of me to try to figure everything out and do it all myself. And it also kind of on a mini level replicated those social interactions that I had that were just built in every day at work, right? My job at Salesforce really involved talking to people. So I would talk upwards of anywhere from 10 to 50 people in a day, right? In these meetings, even if it was just online. But I knew I was going to miss that, and I knew I needed to recreate that. So rebuilding my infrastructure did so many things for me. It tapped into my social need. It gave me a sense of security. It helped me set boundaries with myself so that I don't have to do it all. And it helped me share that joyful journey with other people, which is so meaningful for me. And then even better, I put it on a piece of art. I made a collage. It's there with me. They're behind me, pushing me forward and supporting me. And that helps me every day.
and reminding you. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, Karen, unfortunately, we are coming upon time. I always find I could speak for 3 hours on these calls. I understand why people do 3 hour podcasts, but that's not our format. I was joking. I had with my producer. I was like, should we just run it for 3 hours and then we'll split it into like 3 episodes? Because sometimes you're getting to the good stuff right when it's time to go. But thank you so much for laying things out there. I love to ask, and we've already touched on this topic, so it should be easy, and you might have answered this already. I do love to ask, when do you feel your feminine essence or energy flowing the most? Like during what activity or at what time?
I have a little morning ritual, and I try to get up early enough, even though I don't have anybody else in the house. I get up before my calendar is calling me. I take an hour before I look at my phone. I don't look at my phone for an hour when I get up, and I sit and I do a meditation and I tap into receiving. What will I be receiving today? What do I need to be ready to receive? What will I welcome into my life today? And that kind of sets the tone, and it helps keep me a little bit balanced, because I will tend to overdo, April. I'll overtalk, overdo, do all the things. But
I can
that
totally
helps
relate.
me find that flow.
I was doing an event in December in Houston, and it all came from my team that helps me get speeches said, we need good video of you, because the keynotes I did this summer, like they offered us video, but it's not, I'm like, well, if we're going to do this, I'm going to invite my clients in Houston. And if we do this, I'm going to have them invite guests, and we're going to put a half-day business summit. Like it became this thing. And then I'm like, and I'm in the middle of trying to move, and it's the end of the year. And so the other day I was like, okay, let's postpone this till January. And I had 8 to 10 clients who wanted to participate. So I'm like, oh gosh, I got to break the news. And the first one I told goes, congratulations. And I was like, what? She goes, congratulations, putting that off. You need to focus on other things now. And so that's the power of the community. I love how you talked about building your infrastructure. And, you have to have these people around you who aren't like, what do you mean? Are you like, did you change your mind all the time? Instead it was like, congratulations. She literally said, I'm so proud of you for postponing this. And I was like, oh, thank you.
How did that feel? How did that feel?
Amazing.
Right? Well done. Well done. April, I have enjoyed this so very much. And I want to thank you so much for talking with me today.
No, thank you for being our guest. So I got one more little question. Well, two. First of all, what color is your feminine energy? As you can tell, I love color, so I love this question.
Magenta gold, all around me.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I feel that actually when you said that. I can feel it. Yes, that's your energy. I can tap into it. Awesome. And then is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? I know the book's coming out. I think they can pre-order now. Even if you want to share about your coaching services or what you have on the table, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you for that invitation. Yes, the book is coming out in January. It is available now for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and bookshop.org. So people are welcome to order. It will ship late January. And then my website is KarenMarginot.com. My last name is Karen with a K, Marginot.com. And that's where I offer team coaching, individual coaching, and workshops. And I am delighted to come and help and listen and partner with people.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing. And as always, all of Karen's information will be in our show notes. If you have not done so, go to vixengathering.com/podcast and subscribe. And do you know what happens? Magically, every Tuesday and Thursday, all the resources, the contact information, etc. of our amazing guests that you'll love shows up in your inbox. So if you haven't done that, please do that. And I just really want to, from my heart, thank our listeners. We went top 5% globally, and we're trending in the US and other countries before we hit our 1-year anniversary, which was a beautiful gift. Like Karen said, some things just take off. And then the month afterward, our listenership doubled. and the next month it doubled. So I just want to say we don't take that lightly. My guests and I, our number one goal is to really inspire you to live your best life and let you know that you're not alone. So if there's anything you would love to hear, let us know. Don't be shy. You can always comment on YouTube. You can email us, team@vixengathering.com. And as always, if you enjoy this episode, please let us know. Give us a 5-star review or give us a heartfelt review. That would be so amazing and such a great way to thank us if you get value from our time together. So as always, as I say, the world needs a lot more love. And as Karen and I mentioned, right now the world seems to need extra love. So first of all, start by loving yourself. Practice that daily forgiveness, acceptance, love of yourself. And then when you become full, it's amazing. It just starts emanating to everyone else. So if you really, it's not selfish to take care of yourself. It really all starts with you so that you can give to everyone else from a full cup. So remember, go out and love, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you want access to today's show notes, including links to all the resources we mentioned, visit vixengathering.com/podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of The Vixen Voice.